Is it resonating with voters, or do these issues just come too far below some of the other domestic problems that it's not enough to propel a candidacy like hers forward?
Yeah, such a great question. So there's actually a recent AP poll out looking at exactly this and asked voters, what are your top 5 issues? And foreign policy made the top 5, not the top, but the top 5. For I think it was 46% of Republicans, was actually doubled that from prior. And it's a little lower, like 37% or so for Democrats. So yes, I think that foreign policy is incredibly important. Maybe not the kitchen table issues that people tend to think of, but the news is full of a lot of instability in the Middle East. And, you know, every time you open up your phone, there's something about the Middle East, whether it's Iran or Israel or the Houthis or the situation in Ukraine. So I think people are paying attention, and it seems so volatile, they're nervous.
We have a global audience tonight, as Kailey mentioned. To what extent is the world watching this primary? Joe Biden always tells the story about his first G7 when he said America's back, and the reply was, for how long?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The rest of the world, whether or not it's Vladimir Putin or the Europeans or the Canadian Prime Minister, everyone is watching. And the United States is relevant to, we have boots on the ground or military presence in over 125 countries. We are a leader of what we call the international order, right? We were the architects of the United Nations, of NATO, of the IMF, of the World Bank, of the G7. The United States has led for over 70 years and provided guidance to deal with many of these issues. And there's a lot of concern during the Trump administration. There was a concerted pullback, right? Trump was America first, not about dealing with global stability. And so there's a lot of people looking at the volatile issues around the world saying, is there someone that's going to come help us think this through and work these problems?
Well, and you certainly got a taste of that at the World Economic Forum in Davos last week, where world leaders, specifically European ones, even a central banker, ECB President Christine Lagarde, were talking about how they view the risk of another Trump presidency, how Europe has to think about that. You say that this is an issue that is resonating with voters, that they care about foreign policy issues. And the fact of the matter remains that, at least judging by the tally right now and looking back at Iowa, more than 50% of Republican voters support the former president, who did have an isolationist bent, who did threaten potentially to leave NATO. Does that show that actually it's not just about him, but the American electorate is becoming more isolationist?
Yeah, you know, and it's funny, isolationism is a term that academics actually fight over. Are we isolationist? Do we really want to? And I think that many aren't quite sure, one, what isolationism means and whether or not it's even possible, right? When we think about isolationism, we think about the early 1900s, right? When you could actually kind of close borders and you didn't have planes coming in. I mean, our economy, the United States economy, relies on our interactions with the world. Our health, as we learned from COVID, relies on our interactions with the world. Our climate health, if you will, you know, if we're talking about climate change, the United States can't do it alone. There's absolutely no. So I think that the notion of isolationism is a really old one, and I think that there's a lot of fear in the electorate. Like, we don't know what's going on out there, and the instinct is to kind of retract, right? And especially, you know, there's war fatigue. The fatigue of Afghanistan and of Iraq was real. Electorate really felt that we wrote a lot of checks and didn't get a lot back. But in terms of being isolationist, I don't even know if it's possible. It's great rhetoric.
We're showing live pictures to our TV audience of an empty podium waiting for Donald Trump, and we'll have remarks from him when he does emerge here, having had this race called very early on for Donald Trump. Here, the Associated Press waited 1 minute until after the polls closed to get this done. We had news today, Kailey, of an eighth U.S. strike against Houthi rebels in Yemen. You mentioned this steady drip of, frankly, scary headlines that people are hearing and reading about in the news. To what extent will Joe Biden be judged as having a steady hand on the tiller versus what some people see as international chaos?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think that, you know, we're in the middle of a storm, right? A squall, if you were using New Hampshire terms here at the global level, particularly in the Middle East. There are 7 to 8 particular conflicts going on within the Middle East. I mean, I'm trying to count them and map them out and explain them to my students. It is very complicated. And, you know, they've got these little fires. It is a tinderbox. If you have volatility in Washington, D.C., a tweet, or something to that particular effect. Could be, I had former students who worked at the State Department, and they said, they'd wake up in the morning, they would have their marching orders, they would be preparing to do this, to work with this particular country and push it forward, and then all of a sudden a tweet would change everything. And so that level of volatility is very concerning.
Yeah, and we certainly have seen the former president, though he's no longer on Twitter, posting on X this evening after his victory here in New Hampshire, saying Nikki Haley is delusional, that she got in third in Iowa, as she was at her victory party talking about how she did concede this race but was going to move forward to her home state of South Carolina. She said New Hampshire was the first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. She's going to carry this forward. And we are seeing pictures now for our TV audience of Donald Trump at his party this evening as well. We expect, Joe, that we'll hear from him very shortly.
Yeah, he's got the whole family with him, or at least a number of family on the stage with a long bank of American flags and the typical Trump setup. A lot of phones in the air here, Kailey, as we wait to hear remarks from the former president. I'm curious which Trump we get, if it's retribution Trump or if it's come together unity Trump. We've seen both in the last week.
Yes, we absolutely have. After Iowa, very congratulatory tone even for Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley for the campaigns they were running there. Much more disciplined message. We'll wait to see what kind of tone he strikes this evening. Professor Lyon, just one more question quickly, and I apologize if I'll have to interrupt you when the former president starts to speak. You were talking about your students and also explaining to them the issues of the Middle East. And we have seen that students, the younger population here in the United States, has at least a group of them very particular feeling about what's happening right now in Gaza, the conflict between Israel and Hamas. How much is that dragging on the incumbent president, Joe Biden, his handling of that issue in particular, as we have seen tens of thousands of civilians killed?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a significant issue for whoever becomes president. And it's definitely something that Biden's had to tread very carefully. One, we have been unconditional allies of Israel for years and years, and how unconditional is that? But also being mindful of the fact that there are 22 Arab states, and there is Iran, and there is Turkey, and we are close to those countries as well.